Welcome back, everybody. It is August 30th, 2024. Welcome to another episode of The Bucket Bros.
Yes,
That
indeed.
was nothing but net. Nothing. I heard it. But greatest sound in the world. We got Bobby Marcico here. I am joined by the one and only Ronnie the Round Dog West. We are coming at you with more off-season fun. If you guys were able to stick around till the end of last episode, you know that Ronnie threw a bombshell on me by giving me his top five players of all time. Uh,
And
caveat
then I
1980.
and then I cut the recording and didn't let you give on back.
Yeah, and it went on for another hour and a half after that. I had
Yeah,
that locked and loaded. He didn't even
I think
know.
both of our wives were waiting for us, and so we had to stop.
Yeah. No, we had to throw that audio away because the last 25 of it, I'm pretty sure you were sleeping. But yeah, no, I went to the drawing board. Um, Not that it was too hard. I didn't have to think too hard, I don't think, on this one. Although actually, I say that, and I stressed out around the middle of my list here.
No,
But
I, I'd have to agree. It was difficult since we are going to continue that conversation, let you have a rebuttal, but you actually decided to say, give me a top 10. So I had to extend mine out a little bit more. Uh, and so, yeah, I'm excited to kind of bounce these around. And like you said, my caveat for what I had mentioned was from 1980 on. So no Bill Russells, no Bill Walton. Uh,
and
no,
I
actually,
really
I would say he did probably play into the 80s. So Bill Walton, he probably played like 6 decades as far as
I think so.
what he's
I
able
think
to do.
so. A lot of highlights on the bench, but yeah, pretty sure. No, I mean, and I'm actually ever grateful for you doing that because I almost think that as NBA enthusiasts, we have to sort of separate the NBA as pre 1980 and post 1980. I'm sure someday that will change, and some of the guys at the top of this list will fall off the list perhaps in the future, many moons from now. But it's hard to imagine at this point because yeah, it's hard to make these lists without feeling at least obligated to mention Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell. I mean, gosh,
Elgin Baylor,
I mean, how would you keep the likes of Elgin Baylor, the symbol
Oscar
of the NBA
Robertson.
still, Jerry
Yeah.
West, and then of
Yep.
course Oscar Robinson. I mean, if you're extending to those, those all-time 75 lists, what have you, then yeah, those guys obviously are going to be up there.
And we'd have to
But
write like a novel because to me that'd be like we'd have to come up with like 100 because it's like even for me personally, like I met Bob Lanier. It was somebody I didn't know before, like doing the USO show. I'm like, oh, this. I'm like, who's this? And then as soon as I was done, I was like, oh wow, this guy had an amazing career, and just like the fact that all of the older guys like knew this guy and were like blown away. So there's so many different people across so many different eras that it's just like, how do we the John Havlicek that we were talking about before that should be on everybody's GOAT list if they're doing by Jordan 6-0 in the finals. Well, John Havlicek's 8-0 in the finals, so eat that, Bulls fans. So but yet everybody says he was playing plumbers and carpenters. But yeah, so it's hard to judge these eras. This is our personal viewpoint as far as what these players affected our lives. So yeah, this is all
yeah,
banter.
no, and I'm glad that I didn't have to make an argument for George Meekin. That would have been a tough one. But yeah,
Minneapolis Laker. Yeah. Mikan,
there you
George Mikan.
go. There you go. But it's important to remember that the likes of these folks, your Dr. J, that influenced the players that we talk about, who then went on to influence the players that we talk about. But that said, well, we can, if you want, we can quickly recap the top five that you threw at me before starting from the bottom of the list.
Sure. So yeah, so at 5, I had Shaq. I obviously probably one of the most dominant players to ever play the game, maybe minus Wilt and maybe Bill Russell, but just Shaq was so big. Watching him from LSU, being in blue chips before, I think with Nick Nolte, before I think that even within this first 2 years in the NBA, he just became this icon. And whether it's seeing his logo of him dunking and on his shoe and those crazy shoes, to me, his impact and continued impact is the reason that he's on this list, and to me is still moving up because of his impact off the court as well. Dollar General, Papa John's, you name it, his name is on it. It's like if something's not being endorsed by Kevin Hart or Shaq, then you probably don't want it because it's somebody's trash. So I had a tie for 3 with LeBron and Steph. To me, they're so lockstep with their influence on the game, and as far as just their impact on me is being sucked in to want to watch a game because LeBron's on, or that Steph is playing, that I need to pay attention to this. Just to me, they're dead even. I have, yes, you can see championships, and LeBron going to 8 straight finals is something that, or 10 straight finals is something that it's 8 or 10.
It was 8. It was 8. Yeah.
Okay.
It was 8 straight finals.
So that to me is an amazing feat. So that's why I have them tied for 3rd. Big controversy is that I have Kobe over MJ. You, up until the last minute before we came on air, thought I had that flipped and thought it was MJ, but I had shocked and surprised you once again that it was Kobe, because Jordan obviously is 2. That I just said Steph and LeBron, their impact on the game, to me was I watched LeBron in high school, and he lived up to all the expectations that we had back then. Kobe, out of high school, obviously we talked about it. It took a little bit of time, but the fact that he all of a sudden started winning and became like this Mamba, this killer on the court that we like, you either loved him if you were a Lakers fan, or you hated watching him because he was just an assassin and he just wanted to take you out and kill you. He didn't care. Like, that's how obviously this past summer we've seen so many clips of him running through Pau Gasol's chest when they were teammates with LeBron in the Olympics. Like, this guy was there to just win. He didn't care what happened to you. Like, you were just going to be in his tire tread as he ran you over. And to me, the impact and the reason that he's leapfrogged Jordan, with, at least for me, within the last year, has been since his death, and hearing about and still seeing him on social media like he's still alive. Like, it's so weird. I'll sit there and I'll be flicking through and hearing his message, hearing the way he treated life, the way he treated being a father, are all these things that you don't hear any of this from MJ. All you hear is from The Last Dance and him. These guys are all jokes. And it's after seeing that, it's like, okay, yeah, he's the same thing. He's the same killer, but Kobe's a likable killer. And Jordan's that guy. To me, it's like he was exciting to watch and root for while we were playing. But since then, it's like since 98, like I was wanting him to do something and hoping, even with the Wizards, like win something, do something, anything. And it just never happened. And you kind of, I was like, okay, like, that's all right. I'm not rooting for the Hornets because he's the owner. But I feel like if Kobe was involved with something, I'd want to get behind it. The fact that he won an Oscar, the fact that there's people that care about him that didn't watch basketball because of his Mamba mentality is just the reason I put him at number 1. Sorry for ranting and rambling.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Obviously, we're going to touch on these guys a little bit as well, unless I left one of them off. I guess we'll see. But I mean, yeah, it's those are definitely some fight words. I will say that. We'll get to it as we get closer back to the top of these lists. But
yeah, we have to fill out the top 10 now.
Yeah. In true list list fashion, breaking from the bottom. Did you want to start with any honorable mentions?
Yeah, I to me, like I said, I confused you by saying I cheated a little bit, but I have plenty of names, um, and they very well could end up being on your list for all I know. But some of the honorable mentions that 11 through 20, if there was even a list, like Hakeem Olajuwon didn't make my top 10. Clyde Drexler, Charles Barkley, Tracy McGrady, Dwayne Wade, Kevin Durant, Isaiah Thomas. Like those are kind of my honorable mentions. This is a pretty stacked list, obviously. Um, and like we've said before, this is my list. So it's kind of obviously it's biased because it's me. So
Mhm. Well, I'm excited to see what ends up making your 10. Yeah, I will say the one that made it off my list, and depending on how you wanted to say the rest of the players I had on here qualified, he could potentially be a top tenner, but my number 11 essentially was Kevin Durant. You know,
that's
he
I
does
that
he does
would
have two
be
titles, you know, on it was a as you might say a pile-on team where he obviously joined the team after they had beat the regular win season total. Kind of a strange move, and it will always put a damper in some people's minds, some sort of asterisk on his accomplishments. But there's no question that this guy is one of the greatest scorers of all time, in particular because of how tall he is and the fact that he can mimic Kobe
he's
Bryant.
unguardable. Yeah. Yeah.
Essentially, yeah, yeah. You know, Kobe was to someone like KD and this present generation what MJ was to everybody before him. So I certainly get where you're coming from with the Kobe as the GOAT argument. But yeah, and then Kevin Durant, obviously, you know, he's got as we talked about plenty over the preceding weeks, all the Olympic and just international accolades that he has on top of it. But I mean, the guy, if he's going to be the next player, assuming all goes well, fingers crossed, knock on wood, good health. He's going to be the next guy to cross 30,000 points. He is going to potentially make it into the top five and the all-time scoring list. You know, he is number eight currently at 28, almost 29,000 points, 28, 9, 24, just behind. Well, I shouldn't say just behind. He's got a quite a bit of a leapfrog to pass the next guy on this list, Wilt Chamberlain, at 31,419 points before he starts taking down the Dirk Nowitzki's and you know, based on the fact that he has a few years left on his present contract, or I believe it's 2 years left, and then I'm sure that won't be the end of it for KD. He'll probably end up passing Michael Jordan on the all-time scoring list. So tough guy to keep off, but you know, that's what we do
Hey,
around
no,
here. We make the tough
yeah.
decisions for you
I
guys, you know.
I would have to completely agree. I think so. This is a top 11 list. So Kevin Durant was also when I was looking at my ones I left off. Durant was the one that was the hardest one to keep off of this top 10 list, and would be my number 11, more or less.
Well, I guess with that, I will jump into my number 10. And number 10, I have, drum roll please, Tim Duncan. I had a hard time keeping him off of this list. He is a five-time NBA champion. Nothing really sexy about his stats. You know, he's not a big box score guy. Mr. Fundamental, as they call him, but you know, obviously that Spurs franchise is as good as they are. Couldn't have done it without the likes of the man Tim Duncan. You know, they do have one of the greatest coaches, perhaps arguably the greatest coach of all time, as the guy who helped lead them to all those wins. But just so many. I was after you started we had this conversation. I ended up going on this down this rabbit hole of looking at regular season win totals for like the past 30 years and just the
You're
amount
welcome.
of like mid to high 60 win Spurs teams there were. It was absolutely insane. Um, But yeah, I mean, he's a two-time MVP. He is a 15-time All NBA player, 15-time All Defensive player. The man's a stud. A lot of people I feel like keep him off their list because he never won a scoring title. I'm not even sure. Did he ever even lead the league in rebounding any particular year? I don't think so. But the
That's
guy's
not with
clearly a
KG in
winner.
the league.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Shaq in the league. But the guy clearly is a winner. Even if he does it quietly, well, other than to the refs. But uh, yeah, he was number 10 for me. Who ended up making the bottom of your list?
So this is where you'll get mad at me. So my number 10 is the
You
twin.
put MJ down to number 10.
No, I have the twin towers of Tim Duncan and David Robinson as my number 10. Like I have
Oh,
them
come
paired
on. A
together
two-headed monster.
because to
The
me,
two-headed monster.
it's like Favre to Rogers, Robinson to Duncan. It was kind of the same. Obviously, Rogers and Favre were completely different, but they were so similar in the way that Duncan kind of modeled a lot of his game after Robinson, and just my respect for both of them is like you said. They didn't put up sexy numbers. Yeah, we talked about it last
Well,
time with
I would
Robinson
argue
having
otherwise with David Robinson. Yeah.
the quintuple double and stuff. So, but there's just so many people on this list that to me, I wanted to make sure that they were both acknowledged because like they're the start of when Robinson to the end of Duncan, to me, that legacy, and I think was Pop there at the beginning with Robinson. I think he kind of came on like year 3 or 4. I feel like there was somebody else that was there, and then he
So
kind of came on
if
like
I'm
the
not
tail end.
mistaken, uh, Greg Popovich was the coach of the Spurs throughout the entirety of all of their recent titles.
Yeah,
Robinson was there for,
I think I
yes,
want to
yeah,
say
that's
Pop
correct.
started like in '94.
You got it. Yeah, and yeah, David Robinson was there for two of them, but I mean, at that point, in both regards, he was at the end of his career. He wasn't the same type of impact player that he was. I mean, that's fine. You can put him on there as the two-headed monster if you want, but uh, I
Like I
mean,
told you, I'm
the
cheating.
Spurs
Like
had to
I'm
run. They had
besmirching
to
your
run.
list. Yeah.
They had to run in the 90s with him being, you know, being seen as the greatest thing in the NBA at that
Mm-hmm.
time. And and obviously they had a lot of good teams. They had a lot of like 60 win s teams, but I mean, there's something about. I mean,
Did
Tim
you put
Duncan
two
had
Spurs
another.
on this list? Did you put two Spurs on this top 10 list?
I did not put two Spurs on this
Oh,
list. I'm actually I'm actually pretty sad about how many Lakers are on this list, but it's hard to avoid.
it happens.
Not that I hate the Lakers. Let me throw that out. I feel like I throw a lot of like anti-Lakers comments out there. Not that I hate the Lakers, but I don't want to be the guy who just comes on and talks about the Lakers all the time. All right. So you threw Tim Duncan at number 10 as well. We can go up to number 9. Do you want to start with yours?
Sure. Oh, wait.
All right,
Am
we're
I
going
right?
with my number 9.
No, it's fine. It's the next number that threw me off. My number 9 was or is uh, probably my favorite shooter. I had a good run with him and BJ Armstrong where I loved watching just their games and how they were shooting. But when you drop, what was it, 8 points in like 6 seconds, and then you stare down Spike Lee, that just, it was one of those that just warmed me. I got hooked on Reggie Miller, and just his lethalness from outside and the way that he played like a Deion Sanders type of basketball that I really hadn't seen, at least in a television way that they were showing, because a lot of times they would cut away from it, or they didn't want to show you when somebody was bad mouthing somebody else or whatever it was in the early 80s, or even if it did, but they showed some of it. But just his cockiness was something that just seemed different than, for being the skinny, tall guy that, like, I feel like Charles Oakley could break in half if he wanted to, but he would sit there and shoot
He's
over
too
him.
slippery. You would never catch him.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that for me, Reggie Miller is my number 9. I think he held the 3-point record until Curry broke it. It's like we talked about before. I was a fan of the 3. BJ, Reggie, Chris Mullen that you decided to badmouth a couple episodes ago.
I would never.
Those guys were, to me, it was an art form to see just their style and how they shot the ball from distance and do it with such consistency. And it was something that obviously it influenced the game, no different than the way Steph has changed the game from taking 3 steps behind the 3-point line to versus taking a 15-foot jumper and deciding to take a step back and decide to put up a 3. And then look at somebody or do something because and to do some sort of a celebration. And that was kind of what came about from like a Reggie Miller. Even though I don't think he had a signature one, I just remember like his arms getting crossed up when he would shoot. So, yeah, Reggie's my number 9.
That's not a bad one. He certainly did not tickle my top 10 list. You know, you tend to wonder how he would look in perhaps today's NBA. He's definitely one of those players whose game could translate to the future very, very well. I
Yeah.
don't know that he would necessarily be better. He would get to shoot even more, that's for sure.
In the way that, yeah. I'll go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, well, I already kind of spoiled the name already, but a guy higher up on this list for both of us, you know, Steph admits that Reggie was a big influence on his game as a movement shooter. So yeah, I kind of see where you're coming from. He's got the intensity to go with it, but
I find it funny
I
that
think he's
Steph would say that with his father, like being the one who taught him how to shoot. So another one of the greatest 3-point shooters in that era.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I don't think it hurt hanging out with NBA players since he was, 4 years old or whatever it was.
yeah.
But no, that's not a bad one. That's not a bad one. That makes me really curious who else you left off your list because I will say I do feel like my list is a little bit. There's not going to be too many surprises here. Maybe you can get on me about the order of the players, but my next guy was Hakeem Olajuwon, one of your honorable mentions. My the bottom of my list I could tell is very big man heavy, and then you get to the middle and just goes guards, skill players from there. But Hakeem was kind of, he was a hell of a skill player for his position. He was listed at 7 feet tall, but if you look back, realistically, he was probably closer to Clint Capella size. And so to be able to play as big as he did at that time, it was rather impressive during a time where the 7 footer was king, outside of guys like MJ breaking the mold. But I mean, just the amount of ridiculous seasons he's had, leading the league in blocks, the 5x5s that he's had, the quadruple doubles, the 2010 seasons he's had over and over again, and the fact that when given the opportunity, he made it to the finals twice and won in back-to-back years with good teams, obviously, but it's without question that he was the centerpiece of those teams. Uh, he's one of those guys who I would also like to see in the modern NBA because I do feel like that if given the opportunity, he probably could have stretched the floor a little bit. You look back at his jump shot, and that thing is silky, silky smooth. He was
It looks
doing
a
it
lot
from,
better than Embiid's.
oh my gosh. Um, yeah, I mean it's a little bit quicker, it's smoother, it's a better arc and jump shot. The way it hits the net is just so pretty. He was doing it from 10 feet out, but I mean, you even get guys like Shaquille O'Neal saying that he was the toughest guy to guard during his era, and it's because he had a counter move to every move.
And he
You
was
know,
fluid about it. It wasn't that's the thing. It was like a natural movement. It was like a dance when he was on the floor. And yeah, his footwork back then was second to none. Yeah, I Shaq
I
was
just
so big, but he could dice him up. It like what was it, death by a thousand cuts, just the way that he would move around and just attack you.
Yeah, I mean, and he was obviously a very spectacular two-way player. One of the very, you know, few players to have. I'm looking up really quick. I feel like this was on one of the pods that we talked about, but one of the very few players to have ever won Defensive Player of the Year and MVP of the Year. I mean, he had twice as many Defensive Player of the Years as he had MVPs, that being 2-1. But I just had a hard time keeping him off of this list. Yeah, I don't know. In different circumstances, I could see a world in which case uh, people would have him. He's only like just much like Tim Duncan. I feel like he gets kind of thrown off to the side a little. It's almost like he's forgotten in some respect. But the guy was an absolute monster on both ends of the floor. Just had some skills in both respects that were impossible. Nobody was able to reproduce. So I just could not keep him off. Anyway, I gotta stop talking about Hakeem because we need to
No,
talk about a few more guys.
I think we were all kind of taken in the 90s when we didn't get the chance to see a Jordan Olajuwon finals. I think as much as we did get a Shaq Olajuwon finals that first year, uh,
Mm,
and was it a Ewing one the next? I feel like. Uh,
I believe so. Yeah.
so both of those were compelling matchups, but I think we all yearned at the time that for a Jordan, a lot just that matchup would have been fun. I think, and it would have given us. I think was it that second year was Barkley with Olajuwon at that point,
So Barkley
or was
tried
that well
to
after the past?
so
I'm mixing up
so
my 90s.
so the first ring 93, 94 for the Rockets of that era,
That's the Kenny
there
Smith
was
years.
there was no Clyde Drexler. He came on during the second of the repeat, and
Okay,
then the following year is when Charles Barkley joined that team
that's
to
right.
try
He
to make a
didn't
little
get
bit of a
any.
pylon team. But at that point, he was kind of clearly past his prime, and things just didn't work out.
Okay, that makes sense. I knew he was there, but I should have remembered that he never won one. So,
Yeah,
but
the
yeah,
rejoining of the Phi Slamma Jamma. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. I mean, Clyde's another one. You mentioned him in some of your honorable mentions. He's Oh no, actually, I don't want to make that point yet. I'll come back to it. I'll come remind me. I was going to say something about Clyde Drexler, and made me think about it when you mentioned Patrick Ewing. But we'll come
yeah.
back to that.
I'm also realizing. Yeah, never
But
mind.
yeah, you're
Go
right.
ahead.
It would have been. I mean, it had part of what made MJ's career the story tale that it is the way that he retired multiple times. Um, I mean, name another guy who just up and retires in his absolute
Three
prime
times.
after pulling off. Yeah, yeah. After pulling off a feat that hadn't been done since the 60s with the Bill Russell Celtics, it's really unprecedented stuff. So, but anyway, we won't jump ahead. We can go ahead and jump to number 8. I can start with this one. This is somebody that you already mentioned, the one and only Shaquille O'Neal, is number 8 for me. He, as you mentioned, second to LeBron, most dominant player who's ever played. At number one, easily at the center position, the guy was completely unguardable for just an obscene stretch of time. And you definitely saw multiple versions of Shaq throughout his career. There was the skinny, more athletic version, followed by just the bulldozer of a human
Diesel.
being. Yeah, Diesel, the one and only Diesel. It's crazy just to think that somebody pushing 3 bills, well, probably for most of his career above that, was able to be as dominant as he was and as athletic as he was. And I mean, the guy had absolutely fantastic footwork. Obviously, you wanted nothing to do with him on the other end in the paint. He was not just a true 7 footer, but a 7 foot oneer. Or was he listed at 7'2"? I don't know. The man's absolutely massive. Um, you
I
know,
think I saw it
he
at different times. It's funny. I saw it fluctuated.
it's always fun and it adds to the case when a guy could win a few rings. You know, we talked about three peats being as rare as they are, and that that Lakers team that I'll be honest, as a kid, I despised them for various reasons. We'll get into that, but looking back, I certainly can appreciate it a lot more. You know, to go do that and then come back on another team and win another one. Uh, I don't know how he always had the best shooting guard in the league, or at least the best up and coming shooting guard on the league in his team, but it was just like the ideal pairing and a very doable pairing for a guy like that. He yeah, I don't think that he's somebody who will likely ever be replicated, and it's hard to keep him off of this list.
Yeah, no, it's I have them a little higher, but we'll probably have flip flops here for these positions. My number 8 is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. His career at least kind of ended in the early 80s, but I feel like he had to make the list. I had to put him on here. Uh, Obviously was the all-time leading scorer. Um, and so just his ability, I don't even know, like you have to look this up quick. He won at least one with the Bucks, correct? Because we've seen it in the rafters. And then did he win 3 with the Lakers?
He, if I'm not mistaken,
Or
he
was
got
it?
all five of those with the
Okay.
Lakers. Yeah, yeah. He is a six-time NBA champ. Yeah, much like MJ, he's a six-time NBA champ, and actually he's got, I believe MJ beat by one. He's a six-time MVP as well. Yeah,
Some people
that's
would say he should be higher on this list. Uh, but yeah, I have him at 8. And obviously was a great college basketball player too at UCLA, Lou Alcindor. So yeah, he's got to be on this list.
Yeah, he's next for me at number seven. Kareem or Lou, if you want to call him. I was gonna lead with number seven. I got Lou on the list. Well,
Sorry,
no, that's inappropriate because we're talking 80s and beyond, so it has to be Kareem. Uh,
yeah.
if you look back statistically, the first decade of his career in the 70s was impressive. In his second and third year in the NBA is when he led the league in scoring, which is absolutely absurd. He won an MVP very early on. He won an NBA championship early on with when he paired up with Oscar Robertson. And then you kind of look back at the arc of his career, and there was sort of some dull moments there, especially when he first signed out with the Lakers, up until obviously Magic Johnson became a part of that team. I'm willing to keep Kareem on this list because his last MVP came in the 79-80 season, and when they started winning rings, so that's
But he
fine.
played.
That's
He
fine.
played. Didn't he play after that too? He had to have if he got
Well,
the rings with the Lakers. That's what I was saying. If you played in the '80s decade and on,
yeah,
then
he
yeah,
certainly wasn't the most. He certainly wasn't as dominant then as he had been in the early portions of his career, but still very impressive player.
it's like
It's hard to ignore.
Gary
It's
Payton,
hard to
Karl
ignore.
Malone were all Lakers, so it's okay at the end of the career.
Yeah. He's my second Laker. So we got two more to go, but I'm sorry, three more to go. Yeah. I mean, being the specialist that he is, having an unguardable shot. There's very few people in the NBA who have ever done that with this guy. So yeah, hard to keep him off the. I know it's kind of a weird. If I was gonna, he was my one guy on this list where I felt like if you wanted to say, he's really more of a 70s and 80s guy. It's hard to just take the 1980 and on portion of his career and call him one of the greatest of all time. And in which case I would have KD up here. But yeah, I mean former all-time leading scorer. You can't you can't leave Kareem off. It's too hard.
So here's where
So
you're gonna get mad at me.
oh
You get
boy.
the rest
I'm
of the
already
way.
mad at you. It's okay. It's all right. Just throw fuel on the fire. Go ahead.
So here's where you get mad at me. There's 6 and 7. I have 2 spots, but I have 3 players. And so
You can't do that. You can't do that. It's a
but
tie and then is you have a 12-man list? How do you have 12 people on here?
I have a very
You're,
Stugatz list. This is this is my
you're right
my
when you cheat
my top 14 in a top 10 list.
it.
So
Go ahead. Just
I'm
do
gonna
it.
keep going. So number 7, I have Allen Iverson. To me,
Okay.
the master of the crossover. I feel like he's the reason that there's an and one mixtape tour and everything that kind of went on. He he made it so cool to be just bad. Like you wanted to be that bad Allen Iverson. You just wanted to go and cross somebody up and then step over them like they're Ty Lue and then just like walk away. Like to me, just his demeanor, his personality, so many kids on the floor playing basketball, whether it was playing pickup ball or anything. Everybody had the baggy pants and was trying to be Allen Iverson. Even the big men were trying to do it. It was just everybody was trying to be him when we were playing. It didn't matter who, and everybody. I think the most iconic shot was probably his. I think it was his rookie year when he crossed up Jordan and then hit the three over him, and then he got like the acknowledgement from him, and that was like the welcome. He had a welcome at Georgetown. My dad was a huge John Thompson fan, so I was watching him from early on. But yeah, he was one of those that you wanted to root for him because he was probably shorter than you were when you were in middle school,
Yeah.
and yet here he was just doing everything in the NBA, and it was just I can do that. I want to do that. I can go cross over people and try that. But yeah, so Allen Iverson is my number 7.
In terms of guys in the post-Jordan era who I consider my favorite player, AI was definitely number one for a bit there. I certainly consider him in the honorable mentions, but he too stayed off my list. Like Reggie Miller, one thing they have in common is
Boo.
they never won a ring. It's hard to
I know.
consider them Mount
That's
Rushmore candidates if you don't have the championship. Now, granted,
but
he
it's
played during the
to me, to me.
so you got 100% on the test because you made the test, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, I mean, fair enough. He's got some scoring titles in there. He was absolutely spectacular. He's an athletic freak. He's definitely one of those guys that if the if the price was right, if he was fit for it, he could have been a professional athlete and picked that sport for sure. He's just one of those guys. But yeah, he fell a little short for me. So
Who you got?
wait, you no. I thought
So
did you
I
already
still
name
have
this combo?
6. I still have
Okay.
6 left.
Okay. I mean, we can move up to I actually so I did
Did
it
you?
the right way. I made a tie at five. So my six doesn't exist on this list because I got two people tied at five.
I did
Can
that
you
at
guess?
3.
Can you guess who I would these are two players we haven't mentioned yet. Can you guess who I would have a tie? Who I just couldn't decide one over the other?
Probably the same ones I'm going to say at 6.
Bird
Magic and
Magic.
Larry. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, if I mean, gun to my head, I might pick Larry Bird as like the better, more skilled player. He was kind of an architect of his own, but you know, in the same way that sometimes we compare MJ with LeBron. I mean, it's like two completely different styles. You know, Magic was a little bit more physical, run and gun, super
But
tall point guard, floor general. You know, it's very, but both of them absolutely
it,
spectacular
and
passers. I mean, just
their games are
super high
so
game IQ.
their games are so intertwined because they
You can't have one without the other.
yeah,
Yeah.
it went back to college. Like they hated each other in college and it just continued on and then they became friends because of how much they hated each other. Like it's the great basketball story. It's a great sports story of time. Like, these two fierce competitors like going at it for years, and then they're drinking at the bar together when they're 45 and having a great time talking about stories. Like that's why I couldn't separate them because it's no different than what you did. I just did it illegally and put them at the same number so I could fit in somebody else. And so yeah, they're so bonded together. Like the reason that like Magic begged Larry to come onto the dream team just so he could pass him the ball so that they could play together on the same team. Like to me, those are the things that just it it was so fun early on. Like those are my first, like you mentioned before, coming online. Like those are my first memories are Bird Magic. Like those two starting off and when my dad's coaching and I'm on the court with him and then I come home and we watch those games. Like to me, that era was what I originally had down here was like the Showtime Lakers. It's like, how can I separate all of these guys out? Like Michael Thompson and Byron Scott, like those guys were all people that I associated with Magic and with Larry. Like to me, like those are the games that I watched were all of them with Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish. Like they should all be on this list on this line just because it was just that era of the Lakers and Celtics that to me it's Larry and Magic were the top of it, but there are so many storylines of different guys that came about at different points on those teams, and you knew about them because of those two guys. So, to me, like just that rivalry was something that was so special to the game that made Jordan Dumars better, and then him going against everybody else, and just the Kobe kind of stuff. It to me it put basketball on such a bigger stage in the '80s that more people wanted to watch it, and that's the reason that we're able to sit here talking about it now.
Well, yeah, I mean, and for clean cutoff's sake, the reason we're not the first couple of Joes here to talk about an all-time great list. But wait, but it's got to be after 1980. We're not the first people to ever do that because these two guys came into the league at the same time you know, around 1980. I believe they both had the same rookie season, 79, 80. And it just kind of creates this dividing line of when the NBA was starting to fall off, and then when it once again exploded and hasn't looked back since. I mean, maybe with a downturn in the early mid 2000 first decade rather, but
Well,
yeah,
even
I
that
mean,
first year that you said, like Larry wins the rookie a year, but he's mad because Magic's there winning the Finals MVP. Like to me, like that's how it starts, and it kind of goes from there.
there may never be another iconic NBA rivalry to that magnitude. Maybe to some degree the finals matchups between Steph and LeBron, but not quite the same. Not quite the
Not the
same.
same when you get like two. I don't know if I think Larry was a senior and Magic might have been a junior when Indiana State went up against Michigan State, but just the fact that you had these two leaders from these two teams going against each other in college, like the two top guys, and then they went at each other for another 12 years in the NBA. It's hard to try to get those kind of rivalries just because college basketball isn't the same, just because of the way youth basketball is. So, yeah, to me, and the transfer portal and all of the fun stuff that we have now. So, yeah, I doubt there'll ever be something like that where that rivalry transcends college to professional.
Yeah, and it certainly can't be overstated. Just these guys in their own respect, how they each injected a whole lot of beauty back into the NBA game. It as you mentioned, it transcends into modern day even, which is incredibly impressive considering that was 44 years ago when they first came into the league. I know it's nauseating to think about. It doesn't
Well,
seem like it was that long
don't
ago.
say that. Yeah, you're. I was born in '82. You're making it sound very bad. Like, oh, it's so long ago. 44 years ago. There.
Absurd, absurd. So yeah, so that brings me up to number four. Do you want to? Well, I guess we already know your top five, so I guess we're just running through my list at this point.
Well,
Is
yeah,
there
I was like,
anybody we left off that you had with all of your with all
my
with all of your
extras.
sidecar players?
Well, no. So
You're,
I guess
you
we'll
got you
run.
got a caboose on there that we didn't mention.
Uh, Not that I'm aware of, aside from like the ones I'd already mentioned. I was trying to go through, like there's Stockton and Malone's, but like they weren't fun to watch. They were, but they weren't. Like they,
Yeah,
yes, basketball fundamentally they were fun to watch. As growing up a Bulls, like as a Wolves and Bulls fan, it wasn't fun to watch. I just didn't enjoy rooting for them, and so it was hard to like appreciate it in a way. Just and it was just Utah, like never on TV. So
right.
it was like, oh, those guys kind of over there. So, but no, I definitely can appreciate Malone's style. And I saw something the other day of like somebody talking about how John Stockton would roll up to the game in a minivan and all of his kids would roll out, and then he'd go and drop 28 on them with 15 assists and then go back in and load everybody up and bring them home. So that's the baddest man as the guys drive up in the bus, like right there in that minivan, and he's going to tear us up tonight. So, but there's lots of guys, Gary Payton, uh, Vince Carter in my head for a little bit just because of his dunks. That dunk contest in itself, I think, changed just the social media. I think that was probably the beginning of like I'm going to react online to something kind of deal. So yeah, there's lots of guys that I've appreciated and have always liked. And granted, and Kevin Garnett is one of those. It's like I've played in front of him myself and have seen him play from a couple feet away. So yeah, there's lots of guys on this list that I wish I could have put on, but I got. That's why I cheated my way to 12 in the top
We're
10.
coming back next week with the we're starting in 1990 next time.
Yeah, we'll do it by year. Is what we should be
Yeah, there
doing.
you go. Oof,
We're
that would be
revoting
fun.
MVPs.
Well, this brings us to number four on my list. This one is near and dear to my heart. Steph Curry at number four. You want to talk about a guy who just changed the league altogether. The NBA so much different than it used to be since 2014. Absolutely crazy. Just the pace and space. You're either scoring 2 feet away from the basket or 35 feet away from the basket, and
Well,
somehow the
they're
math.
gonna change the width of the court for this guy.
Yeah. I mean, that it's important for us. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of people who try to chase Steph, which will yield a lot of good shooters. Um, his his shooting touch has not yet been replicated. If it has been, the kid's like 5 years old and we haven't heard about him yet. I mean, this we haven't seen the next person who can shoot quite like Steph, just as quickly as he can.
That's
His
like
perfect arc, the way it hits the inside of the rim every single time, the way he can do it with movement, spot up off the dribble. It's
the
from
consist.
virtually anywhere on the court. Yeah, the
Yeah,
consistency
it's
and
the
his
consistency is by far. I've seen that shot before. Like I've seen a smooth, silky shot. Shout out to Eric Walsh, guy I used to guard Fridley. I know Cesar and I used to always try to stop his shot because it would get up so fast. And then he went and played at a school where they only shot threes. Like that was the like when that methodology was going. But yeah, no, there's plenty of guys out there that had that kind of shot that was so smooth and so quick. But the fact that he kept doing it at that level and like it went on. Davidson, like watching him play, it was the same way at Davidson. It was just kept getting better, like slowly as he went on through school. And then once, obviously, he had some injury stuff, which is why that this team to my right here didn't draft him and decided to take Johnny Flynn and somebody else. North Carolina guard I can't think of instead of Steph Curry. So, but yeah, he's easily one of the best in the.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I want to say is a stat that was absolutely nuts to me is so true shooting percentage, which takes into account essentially it weighs it weights three pointers and free throws differently to sort of say that, if a guy gets this many field goal attempts, this is how many points he's going to score in total because he's scoring perhaps more three pointers and more free throws. So even if the field goal percentage is say like 45%, his true shooting percentage can still be like 62%, just because a guy like James Harden, for example, who would shoot like essentially just above league average on a season, but have like an exceptional free throw percentage and be able to do this at such a high volume that his true shooting percentage would be off the charts. Um, I don't know why I felt the need to explain true shooting percentage, but just in case anybody out there is not familiar with that. But
And
you
you
look
didn't
back
really
and
explain it, but you explained it.
yeah, I tried to do it more conceptually rather than
I'll put the
mathematically. The
formula
math
up.
actually isn't too hard. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, the math isn't too hard, but you look at true shooting percentages of the league, and I mean I don't know what the grand total would be through the early 2010s, but you're essentially looking at an average of like anywhere between like 51 and 54% for the league average true shooting percentage. Um, with the idea that an elite true shooting percentage would be over 60%. This past season, the 23-24 NBA season, the league average true shooting percentage, and this has been true for the past 2 years, 58%. Just unbelievable. And you see that uptick start to occur. What do you know after that one guy was the first unanimous MVP after the 2015-2016 season? This is a very long-winded argument for Steph and just the way that he's absolutely changed the way that we think about everything. Because when you add enough guys on the court, or heck, really you only need one anchor, but if you add guys on the court who have the amount of gravity, a word that's overused but never inappropriately used with him, um, soaking up defense the way that he does, it really just morphs the way the X's and O's look on the floor. And so I mean, it truly is the reason for why we're looking at the style of game that we are today. I mean, I guess you could make an argument that like the Steve Nash, there's another honorable mention there, but the Steve Nash Phoenix Suns really were sort of like the initial catalyst for this, but I mean the amalgamation. I mean this is what we're looking at now. But anyway, he's number four on my list. I considered putting him higher,
You
but
tied.
I
Why
was
is he tied for third like mine? I have a tie at 3, and then I just have the
well,
same. I have 2 people at 6. So
you
I
know, I was a bit more traditional with this one. My top three, as I'm sure you can tell by who I haven't mentioned yet, is a little bit follows suit a little bit more with most GOAT
traditional.
conversations. So yeah, I got Kobe at number three. Um, he's essentially MJ 2.0. Maybe not as quick of a first step, maybe not as much of an athletic freak. Maybe his hands weren't as good as MJ's were, but you could perhaps argue that he was a better distance shooter. And you can maybe even make the argument that he was a little bit better of a defender. He was a little bit taller, a little bit longer, so I think he had a little bit more defensive versatility that MJ did, but I mean Kobe doesn't exist without MJ. He's the first person to say that. I don't need to say that. You know, I he's down here because you made a really good point on he was, what was it, 21 when he won his first ring. At that point, though, he still hadn't really come into form all the way. And it's important to remember that he was on a spectacular team with perhaps with the most dominant player in the NBA. And what do you know? Um, had a coach on his team that just won 6 rings with MJ, Scottie Pippen, and the Bulls. So
But
as a
but
kid who
Phil never stepped on the floor.
that's
Phil
I mean
Phil
that's a
never.
good point.
He did with the Knicks, but as a coach, that's to me, the coaching is coaching. It's that there are great coaches, but you also need to have the players on the floor to execute the plays that the great coach is giving you. And so, yeah, that's all I have to say. Continue.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to mention it. Would they still have had the same run with a different coach? Possibly, but it's hard to imagine it any other way. I mean, it takes a mind like that to corral, you know, egos like
Didn't
this,
Stan
especially. Sorry, go
uh,
ahead.
already his brother? What's his name? Not Stan. I already ruined this now. But I was like, didn't Jeff Van Gundy go to the finals with the Knicks? So he didn't win. I get it, but
He didn't win.
he went there, and so that's just. I'm not trying to besmirch him either, but so sorry. I'm not trying to interject and kill. Actually, I am trying
No,
to.
no, no. Well, I
But
mean, you can have you can have your opinion on that one. No, but I mean, at his peak, Kobe obviously was one of the most spectacular offensive players we've ever seen. You know, one thing that does kind of make him fall a little bit on the board for me, and when I say fall on the board, obviously I put him at the number 3 greatest player of all time on my list. Well, I guess with the caveat,
so
but
low.
even so, I'm not sure that it would change either way. But he wasn't really an efficient scorer. He truly wasn't. You look back at his numbers; they weren't terrible, but I mean, we talk about, guys who shoot at league average versus
He
above
was a ball
league
hog.
average.
That's what you should have said.
That's, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to say it in a nice way, but uh, not to say that he didn't have a high, game IQ or he didn't make the right pass. I mean, he was still end up averaging, 4 to 6 assists a game, which I think is kind of and I had a sort of a side thought. I remember I had sort of a side thought about this when I was thinking about these guys. I feel like that's like the magic number for like all-time great scorers. You tend to see that like 5 to 6 assists per game average. It's like, oh yeah, this guy really runs with the stat sheet. And I'm like, well, when you have that high of a usage rate, if you don't have that many assists a game and you're touching the ball that much, then your team's gonna be they're going to be perhaps a playoff team at best. So you have to have that much playmaking ability. But at any rate, but yeah, Kobe number 3 for me. I see what you're saying with the legacy portion of it. But to that, I argue that I feel like the Mamba mentality is obviously legendary, but I mean just like the pathologic winning of the guy that Kobe modeled his game off of. I mean, you still hear about how he'll be, MJ will be in a room of a bunch of other great players, like when they rolled out the top 75 for the 75 fifth year NBA anniversary. How once he walked in the room, everybody started being more competitive just because he's still that asshole with a chip on his shoulder who they're all wearing suits. There's no basketball in the room even, and they're all saying, "I'm gonna kick your ass." And it starts with MJ just coming in and saying, "Yeah, I could beat you one on one." At whatever he's 60 years old.
Was
And
was Kobe already gone when that team was named?
oh, you're really stretching me here. Was Kobe still around
It was
when?
he was the beginning
Let's
of
see,
2020.
NBA 75th anniversary would have been. It was right there. It was right there. Oh, Google's not really helping me here. Yeah, I think he had departed.
So
Yeah, because
to
2021
me,
would have
that's
been.
a big void in the room where makes only Jordan the main one that's there.
I
Just
think
saying.
honestly, if Kobe was there, he would have toned Jordan down. I think he would have
Yeah,
been the one to help
he
bring
would.
some sanity back into the room.
That's the clashing forces is those two together.
Well,
That
you talk about Kobe becoming a little bit more of a likable guy. I like that MJ is still not a likable guy. There's just something about that I absolutely adore. This guy is he's just insane, and that's who he is, and that's what I mean. It was never off. There was no off button. It was always you had to be number one, and anything less than that was considered a failure. I mean, I think
but
he carried
did
himself with
did
great
Kobe
sportsmanship.
did Kobe do that? I don't feel like he turned it off. He scored what 61 in his final game, and then like I said before, he went on and won an Oscar. Like this guy and started a like another media company and was about to just tear it up. He was going to do what LeBron wants to do. So,
Hey, the original Space Jam didn't win any Oscars, but we still hold it dear in our hearts. All right, it's still up
well,
there on
no,
an all-time
neither.
list.
Then that's the thing, though. Neither Kobe wouldn't lower himself to do that. That's he wouldn't be that commercialized in order. Like I feel like
Yeah,
he would wear Reebok if it really came down to it. He wouldn't make a kid go barefoot. In I just saw a picture where Jordan made some kid take his Reeboks off if he wanted to be in a picture with him walking down the hallway. Like yeah, he there was no off button because it's like he was always a jerk, and so that's a knock for me. And I love the Bulls, and so like that's just kind of part of it. Like I said, you could still be a killer and then realize like oh this guy's a cool girl dad and like he's funny and witty and can kind of open up and give you parts of how to be this killer. Like Jordan's not doing Jordan's just like I'm gonna be insane. I'm crazy insane all the time, and that's okay if that's what you want to be.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, it goes without saying too that if you want to look at like overall impact, I mean, obviously we want to try to keep it a little bit more on what they did on the basketball court as opposed to off the basketball court because that's what puts them on this list in the first place. But even not on an NBA court, the as we all know, the explosion of international play. Um, is because of MJ. I mean, him and that dream team, and just sort of the worldwide presence that he had altogether. I mean, you could have made it to anything team, and as long as MJ was playing on that team, the impact would have been very similar. Um, I mean, since then, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I mean, it's a steep curve. That's only maybe even starting to level off, if that, of
I
international players that have ended in playing in the NBA since that dream team. I mean,
That's
his
true.
impact is worldwide to the game of basketball. Not to say that Kobe's wasn't,
I was like
but
Kobe has opened up China to basketball more than any other player, and that's the biggest country in the world. So to me, it's like Kobe's their number
they
one
have a
player.
huge NBA presence, by the way. Shout out to China again.
Yeah. Hopefully you're watching.
Uh,
But yeah, so to me, like his ability to reach that market because of the amount of time that I feel like he went over and spent there, uh, I think that in itself, he's another reason why this game is so international. Yes, Jordan started, but Kobe continued that on, just like LeBron has done since, and that's why they're at the top three of this list is because of, like you said, it's their impact on the floor of what they were able to do, but how each of them has been able to expand the game to more than just the U.S.
Yeah, I would so going back to Kobe a little bit more in depth in his playing career, I honestly think he would have been a bit lower on this list for me if it wasn't for sort of the two careers that he had, the number 8 career and the number 24 career that he had, where he was able to surpass Shaquille O'Neal a number of championship rings with 5. I mean, granted, he's only had one MVP. I'm not too upset about that, but I do think that that him being able to come back and be the best player on the team. I mean, you can argue who was the most skilled player on those on that three-peat team, but at that time, he was just entering the prime of his career, and Shaq was in the heat of his prime of his career, and we were looking at the best version of Shaq, during that time frame, uh, versus Kobe was still trying to essentially figuring it out. And you can kind of see Kobe's scoring average just sort of like slowly escalating throughout those years until, obviously we reached the seasons when Shaq was no longer a Laker, in which case at time that exploded, and then that became a little bit more of the iconic Kobe that we all know and love. But yeah, I mean, those obviously it had to come with Phil Jackson again. There's something to be said about the coach, my friend. But with him sort of being the anchor of that team, it definitely adds a lot more to his legend. And we're already given the Kobe LeBron. I'm sorry, the Kobe MJ debate without even mentioning number two on my list, LeBron James. I know he's number one for a lot of folks, but to me this isn't a tough one. Okay, folks, it is not a tough one for me to put LeBron on the all-time list as number two. He obviously you can say things about LeBron that you cannot say about Michael Jordan. The longevity being a big one. I do think that perhaps maybe a decade or two from now, we could be reorganizing these lists because we really weigh longevity a lot more than we do today. There's something to be said about it. I mean, to be
Well,
this
it's
dominant for
it's like
this
a
long.
wine. It needs to mature for a little while. We need it to age. Then we got to come back and taste it and sniff it and be like, oh
Yeah,
yeah, this is a really good vintage. This was a really good player.
very well said. Very well said. You know, it's crazy looking back. I mean, it's wild to me that the only time LeBron hasn't been on an All NBA team is since his rookie year. He has made 20 All NBA teams. I mean, obviously a four-time MVP. Some people think that maybe he was robbed certain years, but then you can make the same argument for any guy like MJ, who was the best player in the league at that time. Maybe Kobe could have won another one at least, um, but yeah, I mean, the sort of like all-around player that he is, the all-around talent. One thing that keeps LeBron off of being number one on my list is not because he's not dominant, not because he's not great at the game, um, but he's not. You can't sit down and look at LeBron as he was the best at this one thing. I mean, maybe bulldozing through the lane and finishing at the rim, sure. Maybe you can,
Popping.
obviously earlier I called him the most dominant player ever to play the game. So maybe that could be his thing, but that's sort of an accumulation of of certain aspects of his game. It's not just one thing. In no way was he a specialist at one particular thing. Obviously, he was amazing and almost essentially unflawed in his game in a lot of different ways. His shooting efficiency is going to give him an up. Sure, he's never been like a spectacular free throw shooter. I think he's had some like 80 plus percent free throw years, but for the most part, he's hung out in like the 70s career wise to 73.6% from the line. We all know that he doesn't have a great shooting touch, which is why he relied so heavily on getting to the rim. Not to say that he can't shoot the ball, especially more recently. He's been climbing up to the 40s in his 3-point percentage. Um, but because of that, it in a way it made him more stoppable. I remember this is maybe a bad example, but an extreme example when the Warriors faced the Cavs in that first matchup, and Kevin Love was injured as well as Kyrie Irving, and you just saw LeBron laying it all out there, giving everything he got, just sort of diving into the lane play after play. I mean, the Warriors did exactly what they were supposed to do: plug the lane, make him shoot a difficult jump shot, and it really just wasn't his game. He's more so a guy that I would want to see anchor a team down the stretch, but maybe not take the last shot. And that's kind of like the big thing that makes him. I just cannot put him number one on this list. You know, when we get to my number one, I yes, LeBron made it to 10 NBA Finals, but of that, four of those ended up in rings. Granted, he made it to his first NBA Finals very early in his career with a Cavs team that dare most casual NBA fans to name one other person on, and there's a lot to be said about that. But he played a large part of his career in an Eastern Conference that was pretty weak, and that doesn't say that it was any less of a dominant run, but he was. It's
Ilgauskas.
not like yeah, that's one of them.
Yes.
Can you remember the point guard from that
Hold
team?
on. Keep going. Keep talking. I'm trying to remember them all.
But yeah, he. I mean, it's
Delonte
crazy.
West.
That's not who I had in mind, but yeah, I
He
mean,
was on the
I
team.
sure,
Him and
yeah,
his guns.
he was on. God, oh man, who? Varejao was, I believe, was a player on that team.
Was Antoine Jameson on that team?
I think he crossed paths with LeBron. You're gonna kill me here, making me try to remember on the spot when they were playing
You
together.
asked
If
the
they were in the,
question. You
I
asked the
know,
question,
right?
and I decided to derail you. Sorry.
That's true. No, I mean, do you remember the likes of Danielle Marshall,
Of
Eric
course.
Snow, Drew
Eric.
Gooden,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Eric
I remember
Hughes?
Eric Hughes. Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Daniel
I do
Marshall, of
remember.
course. He played at Minnesota. UMass
But
guy. No, UConn. UConn. My bad.
yeah, certainly LeBron's more likely to throw down a triple double. Although I don't know, I feel like any time you can argue that well, LeBron was, how does he match up like this against Jordan? I mean, there was that one time that MJ set the record for most consecutive triple doubles when he decided to play point guard for a couple of weeks. He could do spectacular things like that. It's almost like if he put his mind to it, he's so good with the ball that he can make just about anything happen. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess we can launch into my MJ is number one argument. Um, Basically, once the guy, once he started winning rings, he didn't stop winning rings. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we all would
Well,
like to see what could have happened during an 8-year stretch as opposed to 6 out of 8 when he retired for
because of
a
his
season.
gambling
And
suspension.
yeah, 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 that wasn't that, it wasn't that. But don't
Uh,
don't don't try to spread propaganda here.
no propaganda.
But yeah, I mean, you look back and the I mean, it. I could go on and on. I mean, I don't even know where to start. That's how much my brain is just overflowing with
You would
MJ's the
start it
GOAT.
hitting play on the Last Dance. Is where you start.
Basically, yeah. I mean, we've
It's
kind of already alluded to a bit of a story tale career that this guy had, just sort of the ascension. And yeah, he had those ball hog years too, but his ball hog years eh, weren't sort of like flashy, relatively high scoring. I mean, this guy was the first person at the age of 24 to score 3,000 points in an NBA season since Elgin Baylor. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous things. When we talk nowadays about like stats that the only person you can really compare him to is Wilt Chamberlain, I mean, he was doing that essentially for a whole decade. It was unbelievable what this guy was doing.
yeah.
I know that his offensive accolades outweigh his defensive ones, but we all know he was a good defensive player. I mean, he made several all defensive teams. He won Defensive Player of the Year. We can go on and on and on. I mean, he had 11 all defensive, or sorry, all NBA awards. But if you think about it, he played only 13 seasons with the Bulls, and and Um, of those, two of them, one was an 18 game season when he broke his foot in the second year, and the other one was 16 or 17 games when he came back from his retirement when the Bulls ultimately lost in the second round to the Magic. But essentially any year that he was eligible to be considered, dominant or the best, it was a no-brainer. I mean, name another player where the two guys that we mentioned earlier, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, in the prime of their careers, winning championships during their decade, we're saying this guy is clearly the best player in the NBA. We haven't seen anything else like him. You just don't see that. You just don't see that very often. The fear that MJ would instill in people, not to say that, the likes of Kobe or LeBron wouldn't, but he was just such a cut above everybody else. It's always going to be a debate because it's always going to be impossible to truly compare these players, as
Well, yeah,
the
we
styles
can't.
of the game change.
It's we sit here and argue about guys that are who never really played against each other when we both just within the last 45 minutes couldn't really separate Magic and Bird, and they played together in the same era. So the whole point is kind of just mind numbing, which is why, yeah, I'm going to cheat on this test because it's my list. So, and it's everybody's going to have a different list because it's all the same. It's like, I, I sit here and I went back and I looked at Jordan's stat sheet, and to me, the knocks that he gets is that 2 years that he leaves, decides to go play baseball, and for whatever reasons that might have been, uh, and then after the Bulls, he was out for 3 years and like didn't play after retire, and that's like, and then came back and decided to play 2 years with the Wizards. It's like, why did you decide to have like those are 5 years? It's like we complain about LeBron taking days off or games off. Jordan took years off and decided, I'm just going to go do whatever. And it's cool. And yet we're still going to be like, oh, he's still the greatest ever. But he decided to just leave and do his own thing. Cool. But like, I want somebody
Well,
who's going to show up
come on,
every day like Kobe
the first
did.
time
And
he
that's
retired was he went from playing one professional sport to another professional
allegedly.
sport. There's no record of that. Oh man. So one of the points that I was trying not to make too earlier in the show was that we were mentioning some guys and the list of players who are considered one of the greatest of all time who make that top 75 list who didn't win a ring because they played in the same era as Jordan is unbelievable. Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler may have been on that list had MJ played in the like 93 through 95 essentially. Um, yeah, I mean it's just bonkers.
Or,
That
or they would have beat him and his legacy would have been tarnished.
yeah.
That's the other thing
I,
that could have happened, that everybody just decides to kind of, oh, they would have definitely lost to Jordan. It's like, no, we don't know that. Like, he could have
because
fumbled.
that's how
Then
that's
what
how great
happens? Then
that's
what
that's
happens
how
to the list?
insane that's how insane his level of greatness was just
Havlicek.
the
Havlicek. Havlicek.
the inevitability,
8-0.
of an MJ Bulls team winning. It just seemed like you could pencil him in for
We
the
never got to
trophy
see
at the end
it.
of the year.
They
We
never
never
went
did.
against Olajuwon.
No, I mean
They
realistically,
handled
I
Mutombo,
don't think.
but they never went against Olajuwon.
Mhm. I mean realistically, do I think that the Bulls would have won eight in a row? Gosh, that would be tough for anybody to pull off. Let's say he came back and they got a fourth one in a row, right? Just nonsense, absolute nonsense. Do I think that they would have been able to carry that mentality year after year after year? Again, we'll never know. I feel like the break that was sort of
Was
built
David
into all
Stern
this.
saying, Jordan, you should take the next 2 years off because I'm sick of this gambling.
Yeah, I know you're just trying to rob me, and it is working. It is working.
Because you have no defense against it. That's
I
the
mean, come on.
beauty of conspiracy theories.
I have. I mean, I to that I say go back to your previous point. Press play on The Last Dance. I mean, it is a defensible accusation. I'm not here to defend Jordan's gambling problem. I wasn't there. It
I'm
wasn't
not
my
saying
gambling
that
problem.
I'm not
It
holding
wasn't
you
my gambling
accountable,
problem. Hey, he didn't have a gambling problem. He had a competition problem. Okay, he could
Oh
stop
god,
anytime he wanted
yeah, shaking down that coat man and is at the United Center playing dice with him. You know it's bad when Chappelle's making fun of you.
to. That
He
was
gets
good stuff.
skits about that.
Are you talking about Key and Peele? I think you meant Key and Peele. Maybe it was Chappelle.
Yeah, it's Key and Peele. It's Key and Peele. I apologize to both.
Hmm.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Jordan's
yeah.
your number one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I can go on and on. I can go on and on.
We're at an hour 20. I think we're good.
Well, that we can make this our next episode, right? Just me rambling more about why MJ is the greatest of all time, and everybody else just needs to stop having this debate.
I'll
No,
send
no,
you the link. You can just record on your own.
but truly, a recording that mysteriously vanishes. No, but I mean, honestly, what makes this fun and debatable is the fact that it is impossible to debate because it would have to live in some sort of sci-fi timeline where we can take the stream of consciousness of present day Michael Jordan and put it in his 27-year-old clone body and then watch the experiment play out. That's the only way to know. Or take a time machine and put LeBron back into the 80s, although that would
Or
be absolutely terrifying.
I want to fast forward Ant and see what hit him in like 6 years.
Oh, yeah. You gotta wait for that one, buddy. You gotta wait for that one. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe. So, oh gosh, that reminds me
We're
the
wrapping it up
question
here,
that
folks.
the question that I had for you, real quick,
Oh
real
yeah.
quick. We can name a few guys.
Brought to you by
So who
T4 Medical.
and brought to you by T4 Medical. My question for Ronnie today is: who in today's game uh, do you think could change this top 10 list for you? I got a few guys listed. We don't have to go in depth on them, but I don't know if there's anybody that comes to mind for you.
That would potentially change. They're like,
Yeah, who's gonna knock off the Duncans, Hakeems, Kareems for you, or Reggie
yeah,
Miller in your case?
yeah. Uh I really don't know. I would love to say Ant, but I'm a
That's a good
Minnesota.
one.
I'm a Minnesotan, so the only way that he makes this list is if like
That's a
Minnesota wins 2 or 3 championships, and knowing Minnesota sports, that's not going to happen. So
that's a way too
I
early prediction, but I love it. I love how nuts it is because this guy's got
he
his
just
whole
has it.
career ahead of him.
Yeah,
He does have
and
the it factor. He is. I wish he was. He was. I think he's obviously he's extremely built and he's got the athleticism to back it up. I do wish he was a little less undersized for his position. I think that that's going to be something that puts a little bit of a lower ceiling on him when we're talking about greatest of all time. But I don't think it's not gonna be the difference between him being great or
yeah,
being good.
the only other, and it's we've mentioned him at nauseum as well, is Wemby, only because we haven't seen somebody like him before. So I don't know if he has a Kevin Durant meets Sean Bradley or Yao Ming type of career, like put those together and those are his numbers. Like, what does that look like? To that
Yeah,
that is what is appealing because if he if he can become somebody who's like a 24, 12, 6, 5, and 3 or something, like those numbers add up at some point. Like
yeah,
that's a pretty ridiculous stat line when he goes into the Hall of Fame if he can kind of keep that up over 15 years. Like that's remarkable, and you would hope that, and that's the only knock against him is that he's not like we mentioned before an Iverson or a Steph Curry where somebody can be like, "Oh, I'm Wemby. I'm gonna like I can't shoot like this, and like
yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
pretend to
What is
be over 7 foot and
what is the
emulate
Wemby
like what he's."
impersonation?
I
You just do the
you
inflatable man car salesman.
Yeah,
That's
you
the
do the
Wemby.
inflatable man car salesman on an 8 foot hoop. Essentially,
Yeah,
is what you do. Like he's hard to. I don't want to say mock, but it's hard to emulate him in a way on the court. So that's his only knock. but I think
Yeah.
his, like we mentioned before, I think he has the body frame to sustain over time, and if he's able to stack numbers and stay healthy, there's a good chance that he could tickle this list.
Yeah. No, I mean that's a good point. Hey, I think one thing about Wembanyama is what would maybe if one day I put him on this list, what would put him perhaps at the back half of this list, like Kareem, Shaq, and Duncan, is that I don't think he's ever going to be a point guard. I think he has some point guard s he has guard s skills rather, but I don't think he's ever going to be a point guard. So he's always going to need that team captain to sort of unlock his true potential versus being able to do it himself because his game is not going to excel, at least offensively, by putting the ball on the floor. Not to say that he can't dribble, or he doesn't have moves, or doesn't have handles, but I think it's going to be a little bit more of his all around and two-way impact. Could you imagine if you could just plot Wemby instead of Duncan on those first teams? Just the ridiculousness of it. It would be absolutely insane.
Yeah.
But I like how you're going like really young and up and coming players. My guys were a little bit more established. I had as maybes. I put Embiid all the way at the bottom of a guy who could potentially uh, creep on this list. I think he's quite a few
Who?
accolades. Joel Embiid, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
he doesn't dazzle me. I you
he's a
drank
tough
some of
one to
that
judge.
Philly Kool-Aid for a while. I
Hmm.
think you saw him up close for a while during the process. I just, to me, he's too injury prone and he's too slow for a fast game. He puts up great numbers, and I can't fight that. And when you're that big, to me, when you're essentially Shaq size and can shoot threes, like you should be awesome. Like, or
Yeah.
everyone should think that you're amazing, and that's fine. It's just I don't. To me, if I see that Joel Embiid's in town, I don't feel the need that I need to go see him play. And
I hear
so
what you're
maybe
saying. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
just,
There's a certain flashiness that his game sort of
yeah.
lacks. Not to say that it's not awesome to watch, especially seeing what he can do on both ends of the floor.
Oh, absolutely.
But
Having sat courtside and watched the G League guys run around, just the fact that those guys
Mhm.
are that big, able to move around, is impressive. And seeing, if I was that close seeing him, I'm sure I'd be impressed. It's just,
Yeah.
to me, there's a different allure to other players, and I he can stack numbers. I just don't see him as greatness, and
Yeah,
that's
I think what made me sort of put him as one of my future maybes is just the fact that, even though he didn't hit that 65 game mark to qualify him for, MVP All NBA last year, what have you, he did something that hasn't been done since Will, and that's average more points per game than minutes played. And he did it in a pretty large sample size, which is absolutely spectacular. So just food for thought. Granted, he's already on the other side of 30, if I'm not mistaken here. So I don't think that he's going to move the needle that much. I mean, maybe if the Sixers win like three in a row, then we have to look back at this, but which I suppose could happen with the new squad I got. Um, but uh, but anyway, my next one here was Giannis. I think I'm going somewhat in order here when I'm thinking about the guys at the back end. But Giannis is a pretty good one. I feel like I don't think he's skilled enough with the ball as a lot of the guys on this list. He sort of breaks the mold as a big guy who doesn't necessarily need a point guard, and then obviously he's got one of very few players to ever win MVP and Defensive Player of the Year in the same year. Just sort of untouchable in that regard. So yeah, I put him up here. I think he's going to make that top 10 list a lot harder in the future when we look back. Uh, but yeah, he's not knocking down threes or turnaround jumpers or sky hooks, and so I think it's not having that one thing that just makes you the best of all time at something that sort of puts him down a peg. And then the fact that he may only win one ring. I should say only. That's obviously a nearly impossible accomplishment, but relative to these other guys, only one ring in his career. So we'll see. And then I put Luca on here just because I think there's potential there. He's already made it to an NBA Finals. I think there's more to come. As long as the Mavs or whatever squad he may be playing for in the future is able to put a good enough team around him, he's going to be one of those guys who can anchor an offense. He is an offensive engine. You almost don't need anybody else that you could name on that team, and you're still going to win, 50 games or something, just because he can go off for 50, 60 seemingly on any given night, and have a triple double in the meantime. And then speaking of
Well,
triple doubles, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say I don't know how many more you have on this list that you have almost making it, but I was gonna say like a Jokic to me would be
Yep,
is.
that's my last one.
I was gonna say like, but I feel like he's at a plateau, but I don't know where he's at historically numbers. I feel like he's well behind in that regard, but I don't know how long. To me, he doesn't seem like somebody who wants to play for very long. He wants to go be with his horses.
Yeah.
So that's I think going to be the only thing for him that'll slow him down from. And obviously, we just mentioned a very long list. I like Luka, but yeah, Jokic is one of those where I feel like cracking the top 25 for him. I don't know if he's there. He's probably right around there as far as
Well, I mean,
if
he's
we were to roll
not
out
just
our
like,
top 25, that's where I feel like he
yeah.
would be in the honorable mention or on the list at the end.
I mean, I haven't looked at all the players, but I feel like I would almost have to have him on that list just because of, I talk about, in order to make this list, I feel like a player has to just be the absolute best at something. And he's easily the greatest passing big man of all time. And arguably, I mean, he's like a top three passer of all time. You can have that argument. I feel like, and there's a lot of
Let's
other
save
good
that.
point
Let's
guards.
save that for next episode. I want a rebuttal on that one, but I think I will hold, and I'm going to write that down. That we're going to have the best passers next conversation, next
Okay.
episode. Top 10 passers.
Well, I don't know if we need a top 10. I don't even know if I can top 10. Uh,
Homework. I challenge you. I'm going to give you a
yeah,
highlight reel.
I mean, you're gonna force me to talk for like 20 minutes about Mark Jackson. I just don't think I could do it.
You don't have. I'm not saying you have to talk for 10 minutes. You just list. It's top 10. It's not 10 minutes on 10 passers.
Well, that's about how the rest of these podcasts are going. All right, but you're right. We should absolutely wrap up. Uh, yeah, this is always a fun topic. Obviously, it's one of those that if you're not careful, you can just go on and on and on about it. It's
If you're
easy for
not
us to talk
careful,
about.
hour 33 in. Not careful.
It's easy for us to talk about all of our childhood heroes
Yeah.
and
We talked about
just
15 players essentially for an hour and a half since I did 5
I think
last week.
I think we somehow stretch it to 18. A top 18 stretch into
I don't,
squeeze into
I
a
don't know
top
what you're
10.
talking about.
All right. Well,
Let's
yeah,
wrap it
thank you
up
guys.
there.
Yeah. Thank you everybody. If you're still listening, thank you for listening. We're gonna keep bringing you more content. We're gonna keep filling up your ears with things that are just overflowing from our brains. We can't help ourselves. We love the sport so much, love the NBA. Got to let it out somehow. So this
Ex-
allows us to deflate the balloon from time to time so it doesn't explode.
exactly. Like I sent you earlier, the first 100 are going to be trash. So keep watching until episode 101 and when we're actually going to be decent. And then I'm glad I'm saying this at the very end of the show and not at the beginning.
'Cause everything you
Uh,
heard before that was just pure gold. So
yes,
yeah. Feel free to write in, comment, let us know what your top 10 is. We want to hear it. Heck, if you got a crazy number one that you want us to know about, tell us why. Tell me why I'm wrong.
yes. And we are getting ready for the start of the NBA season. We are actually going to start looking for guests to have come on. Hopefully, talking to some team management, managers, analytics. We're going to start getting some guys in here and kind of give you kind of an inside look behind the game. If you guys have any suggestions for people that you think that we should talk to, please let us know. Leave it in the comments or send us a message. We want to know who you think we should talk to. But with that, we hope that we are sticking inside your brain like a triangle 2 defense and that you can't shake. So, and we will talk to you guys very soon. For the Bucket Bros, I'm Ronnie West.
I'm Bobby Morsico.
And we will see you guys next time.
Ciao.
Hit him with that fadeaway. Ooh, hoops, hoops, and hoops.